Let's stay with this particular issue of the fuel price increase, and it will definitely not only impact motorists, but will also have ripple effects for commuters who are going to be feeling this particular impact, and whether or not we'll see taxi fare hikes. Let's find out now with the National Taxi Alliance spokesperson, Theo Malele, SANTACO spokesperson, Phala, and Public-Private Transport Association Chair, Vhatuka. Mbelengwa. Let me thank you all for your time this afternoon. I'm going to start with you, Theo. Are you going to be hiking the taxi prices? Should your clients expect that? Mr. Malele?
I couldn't hear you. Are you talking to me?
Yes.
I'm
not sure if
you are not.
Mr. Malele, can you hear us?
Oh yes, now I can hear you. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Perfect. I was asking if the commuters can expect taxi fare increases.
Yes, commuters can do so, but I think where we need to start, in all fairness, and the government seems not to be listening to us as an industry. The government has its priorities incorrect. Currently they're talking about changing of number plate. It is not a priority. That has a negative impact because you're going to change plastic number plates that are not even biodegradable. You turn this country into a dumping ground. The road infrastructure is so poor. It's very heavy for us to maintain these vehicles. And, this is a historic price increase, the third in the year, and we cannot actually scrape. And it is the government's responsibility to legislate and regulate for its citizenry to, access mobility. And yet, this government seems not to be listening. You could even hear from the minister's speech, she lost an opportunity to have actually come up with a contingency plan in a month of October, which is Transport Month, to say what is this that they will do as government to ensure that the movement of people, it is seamless, people are not suffering, because the increase of diesel pushes all commodities up. So is the increase of fuel. We can no longer take this. Instead, we have tried to take this blow, but this is just unbearable, unfortunately.
And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But Rebecca, earlier on the show, there was a conversation with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy talking about the fact that, yes, this it's biting, it's difficult, but there are fuel-saving tips that are there on their websites, and people should use fuel efficiently. Is this something that is a possibility?
Look, we need to question the practicality of these suggestions to say, in the greater scheme of things, do they in any way truly contribute to any significant sort of contribution in terms of saving of fuel? The reality of the matter is the pricing of fuel is becoming a huge, huge concern for us as people who are operating on the road. So the tips will always be appreciated, but are they enough in the greater scheme of things? It sounds to me like largely a cop-out. What we really should be talking about is how are we being cushioned at the very least so that we're able to get by. And unfortunately, we'll most likely bring up that question of subsidy again, because rails and those in the busing system are not going to necessarily feel the challenges as much as those of us who are not subsidized are feeling it. So, it's neither here nor there, these tips for us. The reality of the matter is that we're feeling the burn.
And the feeling of the burn, Rebecca, of course, is going to also be passed down possibly to the commuters themselves, who may have to pay more for taxis.
Yes. Well, certainly. Look, for us as SANTACO, the decision to ultimately declare a fare increase is the prerogative of individual taxi associations. But the reality of the matter is, like Ndate Malele said, the third one in a year. The pricing index in its current form by SANTACO advises that it should at least be only once a year, around May, June, that fares are hiked. And yet, when you look at the situation, it's also changing our policy position as an industry. So individual associations, as advised by the council, are considering the increases. If they are to really effect them, the the communication will obviously come from the different associations, but we're not oblivious to these changes, and we're feeling the bends. One way or another, we're going to have to increase.
And I do understand that Vhatuka, unfortunately, we've lost him on this conversation. We'll try and get him back, but I'm going to come back to you. Vhatuka, are you still there?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's talk about the impact that this is going to have on e-hailing services.
I think it becomes more and more challenging to speak of this situation from an industry's perspective when you take into consideration the impact on society as a whole. I think it's most unfortunate to see price increases within public transportation when transportation is so essential to the survival of all people within the country. But definitely we're hoping to see a price increase to ensure that we as an industry can survive. And we are hoping to bring more attention to the price determining instruments within industry to say, how can we reduce pricing, or where can we save on pricing, or possibly can, the dominant app players like Uber and Bolt reduce the commissions they are taking so that their commuters can survive this time in this very difficult and painful, expensive period for society at large, up until we can find each other as an industry and advocate government to either subsidize, but to also explore other fuel supply options to ensure that we can reduce operational costs.
But how easy will those conversations be, Vhatuka, with these particular dominant apps? Because we've seen some of the tensions in the past between yourselves and them.
Look, we don't anticipate they'll ever have an attitude change, but we are hard at work trying to bring local solutions to the forefront so we can then, as local participants, ensure that we reduce these prices. You may have noticed of recent a local app called Taxi has launched. There's also Shuma that has launched. These are South African apps, and they are sensitive to these conditions that we must face within public transportation. And we want to be sensitive to our commuters and see how best we can implement price reducing strategies.
And Mr. Malele, one thing is very clear, though, and it's been spoken about over time. You think about the fact that some of the owners of these particular taxis are struggling to even make the repayments that are required when it comes to keeping some of these taxis. And I wonder, if we see an increase like this one when it comes to the price of fuel, how badly does that continue to impact their pockets?
As we were going about the crunching of numbers, we realized that, it should be between 2 Rand and 5 Rand locally, depending on the material situation on the ground. So, but we will, however, also plead with our associations to please be considerate when adjusting their prices, and the long distances obviously will be different. So this is it is going to have a serious impact on the pockets of, the commuting masses.
And what about the owners themselves? Because they are also still struggling from the impact of COVID-19, the impact of everything else, the rising cost of living as well.
We had hardly, come up to the surface after the hard lockdowns of COVID-19. We've been grappling with trying to get back onto our feet. And yet, clearly, there seemed not to be any assistance whatsoever. And you'll also remember that 50% of that 1.135 quantum that was offered to the taxi industry as a relief was not, all paid to deserving taxi operators. And that is still with the Department of Transport. Operators are struggling, they are losing their vehicles, people are unable to maintain vehicles to the required standard, and to even worsen that is the conditions of the road and near these taxi ranks. It's just full of potholes, and it is just unbearable.
Rebecca, what happens then if the conversation about the subsidy does not work and we still see some delays in that regard? What do you do?
Well, unfortunately, it's the ordinary South African that's going to have to suffer, because Theo Malele has just comprehensively told you of the reality of the ground, to say we're operating on roads that are in a dire state on a daily basis. You've already spoken about most of our operators' vehicles being repossessed because they can't meet their monthly payments. So unfortunately, the reason why we're saying that we're considering these hikes is because in as much as we would want to accommodate South Africans and say that we're alive to the reality of the situation on the ground, we also need to have sustainable businesses. So we're caught in between a rock and a hard place also, because whilst we do all of that, the messaging is clear to the associations. Let's not kill the business in all saying that we're trying to keep up with the very saddening state of reality in terms of the socio-economic activity in the country. So it's the ordinary South African that's going to suffer at the end of the day, which makes it more important for government to be bothered by that, because it's literally their sole responsibility to ensure the wellness or the welfare thereof of South Africans.
And let me thank you all for your time. Certainly it does look like there's going to be a lot of conversations that must be had, as you are all saying there needs to be more that is done to try and cushion this particular blow on the industry. That is National Taxi Alliance spokesperson Theo Malele, SANTACO spokesperson Phala, and Public Private Transport Association Chair Vhatuka Mbelengwa.